Welcome to the American Farriers Journal online hoof care classroom. I'm Jeff Coda, editor of American Farriers Journal. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, Preventative and Therapeutic Effects of Split Shoes on the Most Common Capsule Distortions, presented by Dr. Bart Halsberg, David Mast, and Didier Rondelez. Sponsoring the webinar is Bartek. Bartek Equine is a U.S.-based company with its core mission focused on providing products and techniques leading to better hoof and horse health. It is the innovator in the science-based development and usage of the split shoe approach to hoof care. Clinically proven, the company's patented twin shoe product line contributes to stronger, more balanced, and healthier hooves through combining the natural hoof flexibility of barefoot with the superior hoof protection provided by steel. Suitable for most horse breeds, ages, and disciplines, twin shoes can be used for both preventative and therapeutic purposes in the management of hoof capsule pain and certain joint, ligament, and tendon injuries. The shoes are also well suited for transitioning to or from barefoot hooves. Learn more at bartekequine.com. So with that, we'll begin the webinar. Dr. Halsberg, thank you for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you, Jeff, for the introduction, and thank you for the invite. So yes, today we're going to talk about preventative and therapeutic effects of split shoes on the most common hoof capsule distortions. The key topics are explaining what twin shoes are, how you use split shoes in real world hoof care situations. We have two farriers as well in the call today that are experienced in twin shoes or split shoes. David Mast is focused mainly on cold shoeing and a wide range of different disciplines, Western and sport horses. And then Didier Rondelez focuses more on the hot shoeing application with sport horses. So depending on your questions, we can direct them to the right person. And then, like I said, we have a wide range of experience in different disciplines that we can address issues depending of what your type of clientele is as well. Me, myself, I'm a veterinarian, and David Mast and Didier Rondelez, David from Ohio, Didier from Belgium, will also represent or present some case examples, and then we'll be there for Q&A afterwards. Let's kick it off. First of all, I want to go over what hoof capsule is, its structure and function. Then we're going to briefly address how we apply split shoes and why we should use split shoes. And then we're going to go over the three most common hoof capsule distortions that we frequently see as vets and farriers. It is contracted heels, sheared heels, and low-underrun heels. And then we're going to end with some farrier case presentations and Q&A. First of all, the hoof capsule. Hopefully everybody knows what it is, but it's that horny covering of the distal digits, and it actually have 5 types of horn: the hoof wall, the sole, and the frog. And then the white line and the periople is the very soft horn at the cornet band, the most outer layer. And as we all know, the hoof capsule is a very hard and strong structure, but it's not a rigid structure. It's actually a very flexible structure, and that's important to understand, because it's that flexibility that makes a hoof capsule dynamic and adaptive. And that's also why we might get hoof capsule distortions, but also how we can resolve hoof capsule distortions. The foot is basically anything. It's the hoof capsule and anything contained within it. And of course, there's the interrelationship between working as a team between vets and farriers, the one focusing a little bit more on the internal structures, the other one on the hoof capsule itself. Today we're going to focus on that hoof capsule, and if we have issues with the hoof capsule, we can split them up in diseases and disorders. And the hoof capsule distortions are classified as disorders. There's basically disturbance in the normal structure of the hoof, and or its function. So there's again an interrelationship between structure and function of the hoof capsule itself, but also function of the internal structures. Generally, they have multiple causes. There's not one specific cause that leads to hoof capsule distortion. And to solve the problem, we need a holistic approach. So it's not just symptomatic treatment, but we want to address the true cause, and we also want to restore the functional impairment. Secondly, we have to understand the function of the hoof capsule itself. It has three main functions. It's protection, traction, and dissipating energy. And today we're gonna focus on the last one, dissipating energy through a normal, well-functioning hoof mechanism, which is, like you can see in this video, a three-dimensional viscoelastic deformation that takes place during loading and unloading of the hoof. This in return is very important for blood circulation, shock absorption, hoof growth quality and shape, and lower limb biomechanics. And today we're gonna focus on that hoof growth quality and shape, which is our hoof capsule distortions. And like I said earlier, that hoof capsule is very flexible, so it's dynamic and adaptive. But for positive hoof adaptations to take place, to create a healthy hoof capsule, we basically need to have three criteria need to be met. It's first of all, the hoof needs to be able to move, and that's what the split shoe will allow. It will allow that hoof capsule to move. It will allow that three-dimensional viscoelastic deformation to take place while still being protected by the shoe. Second of all, as vets, farriers, and trainers, we have to find a way to allow the horse to move in a pain-free manner, because if there's pain, they're not gonna land, load, and break over normally. And thirdly, we're gonna have to exercise that hoof, and that exercise stimulus need to change over time to create continuous positive adaptations. Then finally, we get to hoof capsule distortions itself. What are they? Well, they're basically an indication that there's unduly stress due to abnormal distribution of forces. And that can then lead to different type of hoof capsule deviations or distortions. It can be an outwards deviation like a flare or bend, an inward deviation like an underrun heel, a proximal displacement of the wall, the hoof wall, or the cornet band, a sheared heel. It can be a decrease in hoof growth rate or a compression of the growth rings, where we have more pressure, we have less growth, or we have compression of the horn. Or it can be a dorsal migration of your heels and toe, the long toe, low heel conformation. Like I said, usually distortions classified as having multiple causes, but trimming and chewing is an important one to consider. And good trimming and chewing can also prevent hoof capsule distortions, but when we're not careful, they can also lead to hoof capsule distortions. And these hoof capsule distortions, they're basically a negative adaptive response. We talked earlier about a positive adaptive response. Well, these are negative adaptive responses due to the abnormal distribution of forces. And it is what we call a plastic deformation. When we talk about the hoof capsule being viscoelastic, it has an elastic deformation. It means it rebounds quickly, but it also has a plastic deformation, is that it deforms over time and it only slowly returns back to its normal shape, or there's sometimes permanent deformation. And that plastic deformation can be from static issues like posture and conformation, just standing, but they can also be dynamic. That's repetitive overload related, or abnormal loading due to pain or injury. And it's important to understand that the biggest forces take place during movement. So if we want to fix a hoof capsule distortion, we have to mainly focus on what's happening during movement. Can we create balance during movement, not just at stance? And so it's always very important when we assess these horses that we're not just assessing the hoof capsule and the balance just standing square on a concrete floor, but that we see the horses move, see how they land, load, and break over, and then adjust our trimming and shoeing based on that. Now, when we talk about hoof capsule distortions, they often occur because we're trying to bind a three-dimensional structure into one plane. And generally speaking, when we think about the hoof capsule, it's not a good idea to bind that three-dimensional structure into one plane. Sometimes there's a good reason for it. If we need to stabilize something and protect it in an acute phase, in an acute injury, like a coffin bone fracture, or when there's acute pain from a corn or navicular disease, the long-term fixation usually leads to these hoof capsule distortions. And this is one example here, real life case. Had a nice barefoot foot, like you see, and because of the horse was diagnosed with navicular disease, we put it in a bar shoe, a typical treatment, and we see that we get a hoof capsule distortion, in this case a contracted heel, very quickly. If we put that same hoof in a split shoe, then again we are able to maintain a healthy hoof capsule without distortions, and a good functioning frog, which is again very important even in navicular disease as well. And again, all these examples I'm going to show is always cases that the farrier did not change, the trim did not change, we just changed the shoe. So all the cases I present is that you can clearly assess the effect of a split shoe, and we try to minimize other variables, because we all know, different farriers will have different results. A different trim will create a different result, good or bad, and a different shoe or shoeing package will create a different result. But with all these examples that I show, it is the only variable is basically changing the shoe. And we didn't change the trim that the farrier was using. We didn't change the farrier. And the horse always stayed in its same environment, stayed in the same training schedule, and so on. This is another example of what happens when we bind a three-dimensional structure into one plane. It often will fight that position. And so this again is the same horse, left and right. And I think we should always evaluate the effect of our shoeing or shoeing package and trimming at the end of the shoeing cycle, because we can all make a hoof look great at the beginning of the shoeing cycle and do a nice trim, do a nice shoe application, and the foot looks great. But what we want to assess is how good does that package look at the end of the shoeing cycle. If it still looks great, then you had the right package for that horse. If you get distortions and things start looking off, then it was probably not the right package for that horse, whether it was the trim, the shoe, the package, the balance. It could be different reasons, but that's the best way to assess whether your trim and your shoeing package is right for that horse, is to look at the end of your shoeing cycle and assess the hoof capsule and how that shoe is still sitting on the hoof. You see in this example that we had a sheared heel, that we have a very straight medial hoof wall that wants to break out, and because the shoe is not moving with the hoof, and the hoof is starting to grow over the shoe and break out. We also see that we have contracted heels with a narrow and deep central frog sulcus and a weak frog stay. And then when we take that hoof out of its restricted one-dimensional shoe and put them in a split shoe, then we see that just over time, again with the same farrier and the same trim, we see that these hoof capsule distortions resolve on their own. And the coronet band settles down, the hoof wall is less straight, is more at a natural angle. The heels are widening and the frog stay is becoming stronger, and the central frog sulcus is becoming less deep. So then let's have a look at split shoes, how we apply them and why we should use them. I obviously already showed two examples why we should use them. It's basically, it allows that hoof capsule to move and allow that natural hoof mechanism to function optimally. How are they applied? Well, we call it a three-step process. Like always, the trim is very important. Doing a balanced trim, no matter what shoe you use, is very important. Specifically for split shoes, we try to not over trim the sole and the frog. We want to keep those structures strong because we're going to ask them to be activated, to be loaded, and to be exercised. Very important that we remove the flares. We don't want to shoe to the flares. And it's very important that we center those two toe clips in the center of the foot. We often mark the center of the foot with a hoof mapper, or you can use your hoof rasp, and then we notch the position of the toe clips. Once we had a good trim and we have a centered fit, then we're gonna take our shoe and do a very tight perimeter fit, where we basically shape the shoe so the nail crease follows the white line. No extensions. Very important is that we seat the toe clips into the hoof wall. You can do that with hot shoeing, or you can do it with cold shoeing. With cold shoeing, we often use a half round rasp to help with the notching where the toe clips will fit into the hoof wall. Once you're ready to nail it on, you're gonna take a bandsaw or a grinder, and you basically gonna deepen the grooves between the two toe clips until you just have a little bit of material left that keeps the shoe in as one piece, so you can still nail it on as one piece. And then you're gonna nail it on as one piece, but with this shoe we're gonna use 3 to 4 nails per branch, and we actually also gonna nail as far back as possible. As you can see in these images, we actually nail beyond the widest part of the foot. And with this shoe, it's very important not only to optimize the stability of the shoe, but also the function of the shoe. Once it's nailed and clinched, then you can take a hacksaw and basically cut out the remaining of the material, so you have two branches that can move independently from each other. Now, once you get a little handy with doing the pre-cut and deepening those grooves, and you do quite a bit, so you only have a little bit of material left, then the horse will actually break that shoe in half on its own, and you don't have to do that last step with your hacksaw. So that's basically, in short, how you apply the split shoe. And then once it splits, it allows, again, for that hoof capsule to have its three-dimensional movement. So we can see that nice lateral flexibility that it creates by the branches being able to move independently from each other. And we see the nice heel movement that we have as well. Remember, with any traditional shoe or one-piece shoe on the market, where it's aluminum, steel, or polyurethane, they all will restrict heel movement to a certain extent, on average 40%, versus a split shoe will allow normal heel movement like in barefoot. And you can see that like here in these videos on live horses. And so we're maintaining that normal hoof mechanism, which is very important in those 4 factors: shock absorption, hoof growth, shape and quality, biomechanics, and blood circulation. And that brings us to the importance of biomechanics. It's not just the movement it creates, but it also allows for normal biomechanics. If we look at a lot of horses in traditional one-piece shoes, you often will see a lateral landing, like you see in these images. When you take these horses into split shoes, you will see that after the end of the first shoeing cycle, often they will start landing more symmetrical and heel first. So you will have a more balanced landing. And why is that important? If we talk about hoof capsules, well, it's important because hoof capsule distortions are created by abnormal distribution of forces. And by having a more symmetrical landing, you eliminate these abnormal distribution of forces that are, again, the highest when the horse is moving. So the hoof capsule distortions will basically resolve on their own. So it's a more forgiving shoe, actually, that as a farrier, you have to be less worried about, how do I do my pressure distribution? How do I change the landing, loading, and breakover pattern of these horses? Once you free up the hoof capsule, the horse will do it on its own. Now, obviously, every horse, every breed, every discipline is a little bit different, and so there's no shoe fit all. But this Bartek company did develop an assessment tool to see, okay, is the split shoe right for me, and which steps I have to take to transition my horse into split shoes. But you can have a look at their website and dive deeper into the shoeing application and whether or not your horse is a candidate. That's not the topic of today. Then it brings us to these 3 very common and important hoof capsule distortions that as vets and farriers we see on a daily or at least weekly basis. It's contracted heels, sheared heels, and low-underrun heels. First of all, contracted heels. Well, what are they? It's actually defined as a frog width being less than 2/3 of its frog length. Why is it important? Well, a healthy frog is very important because it's a frontline receiver of descending load. So it's very important in shock absorption. It obviously has other important function, like it's a proprioceptive organ. It's also important in the lateral flexibility of the hoof capsule. In our study that we did in California, we found that 90% of the horses had contracted heels at the start of the study. And we were actually able to create a normal, healthy frog in all horses within a 12-month period in split shoes. Some developed quicker, others slower, and that depends a little bit on how chronic the problem was, how severe the problem was, if there was another underlying issue that didn't allow the horse to load normally. So those were all factors that played a role, but all horses responded. And often we saw that initial rapid response, where what we call the hoof capsule relaxation effect. By not binding the foot, the cornet band will settle down and you will get a widening of the foot right away and of the heels. And then you will get that further progressive change related to what I talked about, movement and exercise, because you need to strengthen the hoof capsule through exercise, just like a muscle, and it will adapt so it can adapt in a positive way. And that's why you see on that graph in the upper right corner that there's an area where it seems like, oh, we are improving, and then we came to a halt, and then we are improving again. Well, that period where nothing seemed to improve is actually, that was winter time and the horse's exercise level was less. So if you exercise less, there's less stimulus to the hoof, so you basically halt your continuous improvement. Just like if you're going to the gym and you want to strengthen your muscle, if you keep lifting 5K or 5 pounds, then you're gonna improve for a while, but after a month, you're not gonna continue to improve if you only keep lifting 5 pounds. You're gonna have to lift 10 pounds, 15 pounds if you want continuous positive adaptation to take place. So the same is with a hoof capsule. And this again is an example. This one here was a dressage horse. This horse also had underlying pastern arthritis, so it was shot with a lateral roller shoe. You can see it has contracted heels with a frog ratio of only 45%. But you can also see that a lot of these hoofs have more an oval-shaped structure in general. So they're long, quite long. And then you can see that not only the frog ratio improves, but the whole hoof capsule shape improves. And these hoof capsules go from oval shape, long toe, to rounded shape, short toe. And it's not the width of the hoof capsule that changes, it's basically the length of the hoof capsule that changes. So even with the presence of toe clips, the toe will shorten over time as well. Again, the shoe is very important because it allows that movement, but we can even get faster and better results with a good trim. And for split shoes in this particular case, I always look at it, the 3 pillars of the hoof, the frog, the sole, and the wall. And if you have one that's weak, in this case with contracted heels, the frog is weak, you want to make sure that you preserve the strength in the other structures. And for us, it's important with split shoes, not only for the stability of the shoe, but also to reduce the stress on the white line, is that we do load sharing where possible. So it's not just the wall that's loaded. We also try to load the outer perimeter of the sole, which then will eliminate the stretch on the white line and also reduce the chances of creating flares. The second hoof capsule distortion is the sheared heels. Well, we all know it's a proximal displacement of 1/4 or heel bulb relative to the others. And per definition, a 3/16 inch difference is when we start calling it a sheared heel. And the sheared heel on its own is maybe not as a big deal. It's more the consequences is that it can create quarter cracks. That usually it means you have a compromised digital cushion. Usually it means you have unequal stresses on the internal structures. And some people report that it might lead to certain nerve impingement with chronic caudal heel pain as a result. In our study, 20% of the hoofs had sheared heels, so a decent amount. And again, all horses responded positively within a 12-month split shoe cycle. And we not only saw the cornet bands relaxing, but we also saw an increase in the cornet band circumference. This is one example of many, but our time is limited. So this was a barrel racing horse with what you can see, a sheared medial heel that with also an underrun hoof wall at the start. And you see over time, within 1 month, the hoof wall was already straightening out. The heel started to relax. And then over a 17-month period, we have a pretty much normal hoof. Note that we cannot change conformation. So this horse has an external rotation of the limb, so it's always going to load the medial side a little bit more. So it's not perfect, but it's very functional and it's much improved to where it was. And we started in this horse, as you can also see on the radiographs, with a typical shoeing application for sheared heels, a bar shoe with a pad and DIM, dental impression material, trying to unload that medial hoof wall. But you also see, if we x-ray these horses, that often the coffin bone is also tilted. It's often sits lower on the side of the sheared heel. So the hoof wall or the cornet band is higher, but the coffin bone actually sits lower. In this case, as sheared heel is because we have more pressure on that side, you also see that the joints on that side are more compressed, so it creates joint stress. And then you see again over time that the structures, not only the hoof capsule balance improves, but also the balance of the internal structures. You see that the hoof capsule or the coffin bone becomes more parallel to the ground, and that the joint pressure has evened out in that coffin joint. And again, these are all horses. Same, the farrier did not change, his trim did not change. We just changed this horse from a typical shoeing package for sheared heels, which was in this case a bar shoe with a pad and dental impression material, into a split shoe. So just by allowing that hoof to be where it wants to be, and as such allowing a normal redistribution of the load, the self-correction takes place of the hoof capsule and its internal structures. Now, some of these cases can be hard to read when we think about how do we trim these horses. And in our experience, and for split shoes specifically, we aim our trim so the coffin bone is parallel to the ground surface. And for that, we use our live sole plane as a guide. So if in doubt, with a new horse or a complicated case, sometimes it's good to find that live sole plane by exfoliating out the sole, and then see, how far your hoof wall extends beyond that sole plane, and that will tell you how you have to trim your hoof wall. As you can see in these pictures, this horse had a mild shear of the medial hoof wall, and when we exfoliate him out, we see that he's actually longer on the lateral side. If you look at the distance between the live sole plane and the ground surface, and there's more length on the lateral side. And we can verify that with x-rays. Our starting point, you see again that the coffin bone was tilted, being lower on the sheared side, that our collateral groove on the lateral side was deeper, so we had more length there. And with the trim, we basically already balance him out, and already there you start seeing that the cornet band is settling down on that medial side, just with your trim. The shoe will then do the rest. But a good trim is important, and why it's important that the coffin bone is parallel to the ground, it's also dynamically. A horse will always try to place his coffin bone parallel to the ground when it's landing. So if he has a positive palmar angle, he's gonna land heel first. If he has a 0 palmar angle of the coffin bone, he's gonna land flat. If he has a negative palmar angle, he's gonna land toe first. If he's lower on the medial side, he's gonna land lateral, so his coffin bone is parallel to the ground. And that's why you often will get that lateral landing, because they want to place their coffin bone parallel to the ground in the landing. So if it's not parallel in the trim or in the shoeing, you're gonna get abnormal forces, abnormal load distribution, during your landing, loading, and breakover phase. That brings us then to the last distortion of the day, the low underrun heels. Very common these days, and what it is, it's basically the structural integrity of the heels that's compromised. And then the heels start to migrate forward and collapse under the foot rather than supporting it. Now, there are several hoof parameters that can describe low and underrun heels, but none have a very good correlation with it, except for the coronet band angle and its related coronet band height index. The best correlation we see based on x-rays looking at the solar angle of the coffin bone, or the palmar angle when we talk about front feet, and the plantar angle when we talk about hind feet. And that has also the best correlation with its biomechanical impact on the caudal structures of the foot. And we know that with every 1 degree decrease in palmar angle, there's an increase in peak forces on the DDFT at breakover by 4%, but there's also an increase on the navicular bone by 20% at impact. So when we have negative palmar angles or plantar angles or these low underrun heels, we don't have to be just concerned about the breakover. We have to actually be more concerned about the impact phase of the stride. And what we found in our studies is that we were actually able to improve on that palmar angle between the beginning and the end of our shoeing cycle. We know from other studies that for every 2 weeks the horse is shod, in traditional shoes you will lose about 0.4 degrees of coffin bone angle. And that's because, the heels, although the heel movement is restricted, they will still move and they will wear over the heel area. And that's what you can see in those pictures on the bottom right. The shiny steel in the heel area with traditional shoes where the heels are wearing and they even wear the steel out. With split shoes, we're able to reduce that heel wear by more than half. And actually, if we stay within a 6-week shoeing interval and we don't have too much hoof growth, we can actually keep our palmar or plantar angle the same between the beginning and the end of the shoeing cycle. And that's because our shoe moves with the heel, so you don't have that friction during the loading cycle. And also part of the heel wear can come where at the push of the heels, the hoof pulls away from the shoe, and at impact, they slam back into the shoe. And that's where the nailing as far back as possible is very important, because it will help the hoof and the shoe to move as one unit, and it will prevent the hoof to lift off the shoe and then jam back into the shoe. So those are the two main reasons why we get less heel wear. And obviously you can see that correct shoeing application and nailing pattern is important in minimizing that heel wear as well. This is one example of a low underrun heel. This was a dressage horse. And typically, often with these low underrun heels, you're also gonna have some sinking of that medial palmar process of the coffin bone, which you see here indicated on the x-rays as well by the arrow. In this particular case, the horse was lame only on downwards transitions to the left when he was really loading that medial heel. So he was creating a medial corn at the angle of the sole. We put him in split shoes, and you can see by the end of this second shoeing cycle, he was already more balanced medial to lateral and already having a positive palmar angle. This is the same horse, and sometimes with shoeing we have to basically work in stages, individualize the shoeing plan based on what the primary issue is at that point in time. When we started him in split shoes, the primary issue was he had a medial corn that was causing him lameness at downwards transition. So we decided there to take the pressure of the angle of the sole by raising that heel, because that heel was crushed and he didn't have enough heel, and taking the pressure of the angle of the sole. Once that pain was resolved, we were dealing with still a negative palmar angle. So with a little bit more heel support, we could speed up the recovery as well, together with the split shoe application. Once we had our negative palmar angle resolved and under control, then we could start focusing on those contracted heels. And so then we went into just the regular split shoe with no support, because then we will engage the frog with the ground and the heels will start opening up, and we can also get rid of the thrush, which is sometimes hard when you pack it. With packing, it's hard to get rid of the thrush, and with packing, sometimes you take the proprioception away of the frog, and the frogs kind of still want to recess and not open up. So this is a staged phase where the farrier and the vet need to think a little bit and see, okay, what do I want to resolve first? What is the next step? What is the next step? So you can be as creative as you like to be. These are some other examples if you need to be creative, or you say, I want to speed up the improvement, or a particular horse cannot manage all the mobility that the split shoe gives. He cannot go from being restricted in full mobility. Then you can actually stage that by creating a little bit of mobility, like with adding just a flat pad. You will still create lateral flexibility, but you will limit heel movement. As you can see in this video, you still have nice lateral flexibility, but the pad will restrict the heel movement. And then you can move into, for example, a different pad. It's a twin shoe pad specifically designed for the split shoe that gives frog support, but that can also move with the shoe and with the foot. So you can get creative depending on the type of issue you're dealing with. With that, I'm going to hand it over to David Mast for his case, and then Didier Rondelet for his case, and then after that we can go to some Q&A.
Okay.
David, go at it.
All right. So I can't actually see my camera, Bart. I don't know if something changed on your end there, but so I don't know if I'm in focus or not. I've moved around. I don't know if you can see me, but so anyway, as Bart said, I shoe in Ohio, mid-Ohio, northeast Ohio. As you can, I have some in the PowerPoint there on the screen. I do mostly colt fit these shoes, which I know is different than most people will do, but I've had very, very good success with it. And this horse on your screen is one of my case studies that I was dealing with high-low issues and quite a bit of abscess. We were constantly dealing with abscesses. And so we started trying different things per vet recommendation, the typical, like where we did the frog support, 3D pads, different things. And I just was not getting anywhere with it. So after a while, we ended up going with the twin shoe, and just the first time coming back, 6-week cycle coming back, I noticed immediately a big difference on the low foot. I really wasn't sure what it was going to do, because at that point I was still concerned that splitting that shoe, maybe that foot will spread out more, and I might even lose what I already had gained a little bit bringing it up. But it was quite the opposite. I immediately had the foot stayed a lot more under the horse and stayed collected a lot better over the 6-week period. And the owner immediately noticed a difference in also at the end of the cycle that you weren't having the tripping that she was having problems with in the typical shoes. So it just seemed was the feet staying more under the horse. It helped the tripping a lot in the timing. Let's see. So it was in the end of the second reset, so at the 12-week period. Really couldn't hardly tell that you had a high-low. We're dealing with a high-low, especially after the trim. You'd still see it a little bit before we trimmed, but the feet just altogether became a lot stronger. Like I noticed, just especially the low foot. The high foot I wasn't really having that much problem with as far as the strength of the foot, but the low foot I very quickly noticed that just overall a lot stronger. I have a couple other case studies too from like over in the knees that was in a 6-week period, noticed a very, very big difference. Going to touch a little bit on the application of the Colt fit versus hot fit. As Bart said, if you're Colt fitting, I do use half rounds to set in my toe clips. And then I have a file that I use to actually finalize my groove for the clip. So that helps a lot in that. And then I got to the point where I'm also resetting my shoes, which that's something that takes some practice and getting used to. But as Bart said, we're just touching the basics today. So, and you can always go to the website for more and get more information on all that. So I think I covered kind of my points of the highlights of what I wanted to touch on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to DJ.
All right, DJ.
Okay, yeah, thank you. No, as I was part of the research program that was presented during the Hoof Care Summit by Martin Oosterlink in 2020 at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, I started working with the shoes, the European version of the shoes. Also did the trial study in Belgium with Dr. Bart, and saw really the benefits of it. And so that's where I started working on that horse. It's a Grand Prix dressage horse based in Sweden. And they contacted me for lameness issues and hoof capsule distortions like crazy. And as you can see in the picture on January 5th in 23, you really see a contracted heel, deep central sulcus, where I do have to give you a little bit of information, background information, as the horse has severe osteoarthritis, or ring bone as we call it. The horse was in quite some pain, and so couldn't train, couldn't develop, couldn't load that foot like we would have wanted to load it. And so we weren't able to develop a wider foot. So that's where, with the normal shoeing, so that's where we started and putting her into twin shoes and split shoes. And over a period of 1 year, as you can see, from January 5th to January 29th, 24, till the end of 24, December 24, you still see that improvement. So here the problem was, as it was very contracted, upright feet have more stiffer feet, so they develop less fast than a normal foot, like we would have expected. So here it took quite some time, but still we achieved a healthier foot structure. The goal was here to get rid of the pain, to get that hoof flexibility back. And so that's where we accomplished because of the team approach. Like Dr. Bart did the necessary medication treatments, and so the trainer could start riding and training the horse again. And with the split shoe, the hoof could develop in a normal ratio, like width length ratio. As you can see here, the frog ratio gained up to 60% as we have that ratio width length ratio. And so you can see the heel width also increasing and developing a more healthier foot structure. And if we go to the next slide, there we really see also an improvement, like Bart mentioned. You have a negative palmar angle, although it was really contracted, and long heels. And you see over time, January 5th till August 23rd and 24, you do see that from, let's say, a -1 palmar angle, that we went to a 0 to +1. But you really see that heel angle, left picture compared to the right picture. You see that heel angle already improved quite a lot. And the hoof ratios, the balance improved also over time. As I said, it's an upright foot, it's a more stiffer foot, so it took quite some time to achieve our goal. But like now, she transitions into barefoot and even developed a more healthier foot. So it was a transition during her competition period that we kept her into split shoes. And now she retired because of age, and so she's barefoot and still doing her chores like recreational dressage riding. But that's where over time you see really the benefits of the application. So this is for me, that was a really nice example of the application of the split shoe. And why didn't we put her into or barefoot, or kept her barefoot? Because she was a little bit sore-footed going barefoot. So that's where that was the best option. So no, that was pretty much my case. Why you should consider on using in some pathologies the split shoe.
Perfect. Thank you, DJ. Then a quick recap before we go to Q&A. I said today we focused on hoof capsule distortions, but you can obviously use it for joint osteoarthritis because of the lateral flexibility. It keeps the pressure in the joints more evenly on uneven footing and turns or lateral work, just like the case DJ presented, or certain ligament injuries where you have uneven stress, or obviously for the caudal heel pain, like we see with these long toes, low heels. But we also see improved performance with it. And we've been using it to transition horses from or into barefoot, or rehab the foot while the horses are laid up for a certain injury. So you can use it in many different ways, which makes it a nice tool in your toolbox as a farrier. And you can obviously use it, as we presented, in a lot of different disciplines, especially disciplines that have a lot of work on uneven footing, medial lateral motion, the lateral work, and turns, just to name a few disciplines there. But in the examples, again, we showed dressage cases, barrel racing horses, Western pleasure horses. I use it at home on my eventer horse. So it has a wide range of uses. With that, that's the end of the talk, and I would like to open it up for Q&A. So Jeff, you can take the lead, I think, here.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation tonight. If you would like to ask a question of the gentleman, there's a Q&A box down in the bottom of your screen. You might have to move your cursor over it to make it appear. Feel free to ask any questions throughout. We'll kick it off with a couple here. Dr. Halsberg and Didier mentioned that this isn't just a shoe that you've put together. There's some pretty deep research put on this even before you started applying it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, Didier can comment as well, as he was involved in the initial research at the University of Ghent Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. They indeed did the research in 2019, where they looked at measuring the heel movement and comparing that with a traditional shoe, split shoe and barefoot, where they actually showed, yes, indeed, this shoe allows for normal heel movement versus traditional shoes, as we know, restrict heel movement about 40%. And then I, as a veterinarian, basically did a lot of the field trials for this company, and to look, okay, in real life, does the shoe stay on in a different environments, different disciplines, and how does the hoof capsule respond to it positively or negatively, short term and long term? We followed horses up. We have data on some horses now already 3-4 years. Some horses have been in these shoes for now, I think, year 7. So we have a lot of data and long-term data on it.
Yeah, that's that. I've been out with Eric a few times while they applied them on different shoes here in Wisconsin, and so I know that there's been an exhaustive process. There's a question here about draft horses. Would you recommend from draft horses that might have underrun heels or synthetic shoes? The question goes on asking about how do they clip the front. So first, let's tackle draft horses. Would you recommend it for draft horses, or do they make them in that size? I suppose is probably the more appropriate question to start with.
Well, if I can jump in on that question, what I did see during the trial study and during the research program, that when you have, let's say, a flat foot, like minor sole concavity, where you want that little support, that's necessary to maintain that concavity, that sole concavity. So with the bigger breeds, heavier breeds like draft horses, like the Percheron, I wouldn't recommend it because you do have that weight giving an issue to the stability. Also, they only come nowadays till size 3. So, and size 4 is in the making, but even size 4 for the heavier warm bloods. In Bart's presentation, you did see that 3D printed sole pad with the dental impression material. That's also to keep that foot more positive instead of over that 4 or 5 week shoeing interval that he's placed too much. So I think that will be the biggest issue, that you have too much forces, downward forces. Like when you want to keep them barefoot, you see that's going open like crazy. So that will be still be the issue with the split shoe. So that's where I wouldn't recommend it, all except for that support that you would be able to give them. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that will answer the question.
Okay. Dr. Halsberg, you mentioned that you use it on eventing horses. Another question is, would you recommend them for carriage horses, which are Usually larger warm bloods.
Yeah, well, maybe David can comment on it. We're actually currently working with twin shoes on those type of horses. We still don't have much experience with it, but the initial feedback is good. But maybe David can comment on it.
So I was actually in the messages reading a little bit. Jeff, can you, on the specific one, can you repeat that? The one you were on? I was in there reading different ones. Which one was the question on that?
I was under the draft horses, underrun heels, synthetic shoes, and then he asked a similar question about carriage horses.
Oh, the carriage ones. Okay, yeah. So I've actually just recently focusing more on the carriage ones for traction's sake. We have one currently that standardbred that's pretty long reach trotter that we put the traditional drill tech traction on, and so far they are very pleased. We actually were able to put quite a bit less depth of traction on and still have more traction because the shoe, this is for on the asphalt roads here in Ohio. And so the owner very quickly noticed a difference in uneven surfaces on the road because you're constantly on the uneven surfaces. This one particular horse, he said, was always pulling the one direction because of probably the slant in the road. And he said that within the first time out, he noticed a big difference, but each time out, it's gotten better. So it does seem that we can apply less traction and have more traction because we're not having to deal with one heel applying heavier on the road than the other heel or toe, vice versa. So I've had so far very good feedback on that, but we're going to keep case studies going on that over the next months coming up.
Okay. Now, another question is, how do I clip the front?
How do I clip the?
Yeah, well, the shoes come with the clips.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The shoes come with 2 toe clips and 2 side clips. Yes. And then the positioning the toe clips into the hoof wall is important, but okay, that's like with any toe clip shoe. And now you're just dealing with 2, so centering it is important. So maybe the DJ or David can comment on that part.
Well, what I usually
Go ahead.
Yeah. So for the toe clips, no, the 4 clips do have their purpose. So you do need to keep the 4 clips to have the stability once it's in a split condition, in a split application. Now, what I usually do, I also use the half rounds. For me, it's mostly hot fitting half rounds. Then I just angle the toe clips and seat them nicely in with my final burn. You can carve them out with your hoof knife too, like you really see in the AFA competitions. That they really have those toe clips nicely seated in, like flush with the dorsal hoof wall. So that's my goal, to really have a nice stability that they are one with the foot. The side clips can go against the hoof wall, although that medial side clip, I would rather have him also nicely seated in so that he's really flush with that medial hoof wall, that he doesn't interfere. But the toe clips, they really need to be seated in, like you have nice shoulders that replaces the nails on the opposite side. So that's where you really see, once it's split, you lose a little bit stability of that one piece. And that's where the toe clips will act as an anchor and replaces the nails on the opposite side for that stability. So that's where I do prep them like David does, but my final burning is really try to have those toe clips nicely seated in. That's it. David, for your cold shoeing application, help us out.
Yes, so that's the cold shoeing application is very similar. I've done both hot and cold. I just do mostly cold in everyday shoeing anyway. So I wanted to be able to tell people, because that was one, at first I did have people ask a lot, can I cold shoe with these? Can I cold shoe with these? So for one, I wanted to do it and see if it's harder to cold shoe than hot shoe. It's like any other part of the shoeing. It's what you get used to. It's what you get good at. So it's definitely, I think, just if you're used to cold shoeing like any other shoe, then the process is just going to be getting used to it. I just want to reiterate on the importance. So I was one of them that at first thought, why not just make my own version? And I think this is kind of where one of these questions was going to, is if I tried my own version, can I just apply double clips in the toe? The biggest thing you'll notice when you do get a pair of these shoes is how different the design is. How much more shallow the holes are punched so that you can tight fit. You're no longer doing the heel extension and medial lateral extension for expansion. So it is, yes, you can make your own shoe punch more shallow and all that, but the design is just so different. Was the offset from inside, like the inside of the V groove versus the outside, the offset, so that you don't have as much leverage. So I just wanted to touch base on the importance of that while we're on this.
How is the wear compared to other keg shoes, I suppose, is the best way to put it?
So I guess since I reset, I'll do that. So the wear is less than 50%. Like there's such a big difference in the wear. Like you almost, like at 6 weeks, the shoe still looks new. One of my cases was one that just wore toes through. In the regular shoe, she would have the toe wore back, squared off, everything else, even with the shoe set back. Now I full fit the toe, and I actually tried. Some will say, well, maybe you should have full fit a regular shoe. I tried that. She still wore the toe back. So was the split shoe, I came back 6 weeks, really couldn't hardly tell anywhere whether it's on the top of the shoe from footwear or the bottom. 12 weeks, now you could start seeing a little bit of wear, but I was amazed at 18 weeks how little wear was on that shoe. And you no longer get much of a nail hole wear because the shoe goes where the foot goes. So wear is a big deal.
And you mentioned the possibility of making your own shoe, which didn't work out. But DJ said something about a European version of the shoe. Is there a difference to the US version?
Yes, European version is also patented here in Europe, and let's say that's version 1 of the design of the shoe. It's less sophisticated than the split shoe like the twin shoe now. The twin shoe has like penciled heels. There's more engineering into it. It has new features like 6 nail holes on each branch, so we have more options for nailing. The side clips are higher, so that even if you want to use them as a one-piece shoe with a pad, you have that extra height, that more surface against the hoof wall, that the clip still has a function. It has a built-in sweep. The penciled heels are more into that perimeter fit. It's not the same shoe, and also we made them thinner, like 7 millimeters instead of 8 millimeters. And we're even, because of that minor wear pattern, we're even considering on making them a little bit thinner, lighter, so that the frog is engaging as fast as possible, that you don't have to cover that extra height with a normal shoe or with our European 8 millimeter version shoe. That I have to grind not 1 minute more, but I have to grind a little bit more European version compared to the US version. Yes. But the concept is still the same. No, it's the same, but just we added it's a lot of features.
Yeah, it's a lot of different features, not only to improve the stability of the shoe on the hoof, but also to make it more farrier friendly, and also to remove all lever arms, because lever arms generally are detrimental to the horse. So like Didier said, the European version was generation 1, and we made a lot of changes through our clinical trials too, seeing what worked, what didn't work, where we had issues with, to make it a shoe that was farrier friendly, improve the stability and its function too, by adding all those features to it.
Are there any plans to offer it outside of Europe?
Well, right now our shoe is basically marketed in America, and we also do Canada and Central and South America. Some European countries have become free. It's a free market where the patents are no longer existing. So our shoe is available there too, like the Scandinavian countries. But other countries are still protected, where the original inventor kept the patents. And that's where that generation 1 European shoe is available for use.
Great. Have you ever used the split shoe for just one foot for a therapeutic reason or any other?
Well, we did actually, and we did a clinical trial, a pilot study in Belgium, where we took 5 horses with quite symmetrical feet, and applied the split shoe, so the same shoe, but on one foot we didn't split it, and on the other foot we did split it. So we basically could evaluate just the one variable, whether the shoe is split or not split. It's the same horse, quite symmetrical feet, just left to right. They take the same steps. It's the same farrier, the same environment. And even in that study, we saw the same results as we did in our clinical trial studies in California, is that we saw all the positive changes taking place in the split shoe, and then some of the negative effects of a traditional one-piece shoe taking place in the foot that was not split. But I think some people maybe ask that question, whether you have a high-low or a clubfoot low heel, where you would want to split one and don't split another one. But some horses don't like that. DJ has some experience with that, where they forgot to split one shoe and then the horse showed some lameness or discomfort. But DJ can maybe comment on that.
Yeah, so with the application, after the fitting, we do a pre-cut, and like my pre-cuts are pretty heavy. Like I'm just able to nail it on as a one-piece shoe, and the moment that the horse puts his weight on that foot, it could already break. So it was a colleague of mine here in Belgium, and he was shoeing the horse. He shot his own horse and just tried it out, and he did a minor pre-cut, and so that he didn't perform the final step, that final cut. And 1 week later, he called me, said, like, my horse it's not lame, but there's an issue. And so I said, yeah, come by, and I checked it, and that's where I noticed that one shoe was split, had broken in two, and the other one didn't break. And so it was on that foot that he showed us a little bit of discomfort. I took the hacksaw, opened it up, and let him walk like for 5 minutes. And after the 5 minutes, we evaluated them again, and you really saw that the horse started getting in balanced gait. So that's where an open and a closed application of the split shoe on that one horse, it could give you some problems. If it's nearby, you can try it, no doubt. But like if you have to drive an hour and a half to see that horse again, or that the owner calls you and says like, "Hey, my horse isn't that good with the application, so you don't have to go back," or when you have to go back, make sure that it's nearby if you want to try it. But for me, if I wanted to do such an approach, I would even do it on the low heel instead of the high heel, because the low heel will gain more palmar angle or plantar angle, but you do want that upright foot have more flexibility too. So why would you do it on one foot instead of both?
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I agree with that, because I was thinking of the same thing on that. Like, you definitely don't want to, because I've had guys ask me, well, if I have high low, should I just split the one and not the other? And on all the ones I've dealt with, I don't see any reason why you would do that. Could it work? Maybe, but I haven't found a reason to only split one in a case like that.
If you have a more upright foot, or a sheared heel, you have the side bones could develop much more faster. So that's where you want to have that hoof flexibility. And like with the low heel, you want to improve that angle. So yeah, just split both shoes.
We have another question. Would split shoes help with a club foot on a horse whose hoof capsule grows uneven and rolls outside to inside as he lands on the ground?
Who's going to take that one?
Well,
Yeah.
I think yes, as I showed the slide there, a lot of these horses will land lateral first and then jam and load the medial heel. It's also a reason why a lot of these horses will get sheared heels. So we do see by freeing up the foot that it changes their landing, loading, and breakover pattern, and I think that's a big reason why we don't see the shoe wear either, because they're
Right.
landing, loading, and breaking over in a more balanced way, and that's across all horses. You can pull shoes of all different horses in split shoes; they all wear similar. It's a very symmetrical wear and very minimal wear. If you look then in this particular discussion at the ground surface of the shoe, clubfoot in general will respond slower because they're stiffer in nature, and these stiffer, more upright feet also have a natural tendency to contract. So their response for like improving contracted heel will be slower just because of the nature of the hoof capsule. That's why these lower underrun heels actually respond quicker, which seems initially counterintuitive.
Yeah.
The only issue or thing you have to watch, if it's a really severe clubfoot, then they might develop a vertical toe crack if you don't take care of the dish or the mechanical lever of it. So that's one thing you have to be a little bit careful with in the more severe club feet, but maybe the farriers can comment on that.
So I currently have I currently have one that was, I would say, a pretty aggressive club foot. The other one was more of an ideal foot. It wasn't as much club and then low. It was more of a club, and then the other one was more of the ideal foot. And so I was a little concerned, as Bart said, as far as like the toe clip, like taking care of the dish that develops in a club foot like that. And I was actually very, very pleased with how fast. Yes, you're not going to get rid of the clubfoot. It's not gonna get rid of that part. But this horse in particular was very heavy lateral landing, and that was the biggest thing that I noticed within a 12, like the 6-week cycle, but by the 12-week period, was that there was no wear on the lateral side, and the hoof capsule was just overall relaxing a lot more. So that was my experience with that.
For the application on a clubfoot, do be careful if you have a laminar wedge like that dorsal dish, and the laminar wedge is quite massive, that you still have enough stability. The dish will disappear because of the mechanics over time. So that's where you might not achieve in 1 or 2 shoeing cycles that dish will disappear, but it will disappear because the horse won't fight or the foot won't fight the mechanics anymore. So you won't have that dish recurring. But it takes some time. But if you have a really severe wide laminar wedge, that's where you do have to watch out in the application. But you will have a big improvement. And also that lateral landing, you do have to look a little bit higher than the foot is, because you could have a rotational issue too. That's where some horses still keep on landing on that lateral side, but not as much as it will improve. But some horses, you do see them slightly landing on the lateral, but that's where you have or a valgus or a rotational issue. But overall, clubfoot will benefit of it. Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe someone mentioned earlier about the split shoes can be used for side bone. Was that correct? And how small would the sizes be offered in the US?
Well, we have size 000 to size 4. So pretty small 000. They're similar to Kirkhardt sizing, for a comparison. And yes, you can use them for side bone. I think at the University Faculty of Veterinary Medicine in Ghent is one of the shoe applications they use for side bones. But DJ can probably comment on that.
Well, the side bones, for me, some horses do have some pain issues at a certain time. That's where the side bone shoe could be beneficial during that pain. Once the pain is gone, the horse it's not going to heal, but you have more calcification of the side bone. It will stabilize, and that's where you don't want that hoof wall interfere with that side bone because of the jamming. So that's where, if your hoof wall gets its flexibility back, where we see the benefits of that split shoe. But side bone shoe is a good application, is a good approach when the horse is lame because of the side bone. I use it too, but once the horse is comfortable again, side bone isn't an issue anymore, then that's where you do want to have that hoof flexibility again and hoof relaxation, because the side bone will be because of a sheared heel or because of an injury. And I have 4 or 5 year old show jumpers that had an injury when they were out in the field playing with each other and just stepped on each other's feet like crazy and developed a side bone. So that's where, in that young age, you see the horses going lame, sometimes lame, yes. And once they are fixed, that's where you want to have that flexibility of the hoof capsule, and that's where or synthetic composite shoeing or the split shoe that I see really nice results with it.
Yeah, and
So
I think if we're talking about injuries or pathologies, I always look at, okay, how do I rehab the foot with my shoeing, or the injury or pathology with my shoeing? And I always look, if it's acute, it's acute usually needs a certain amount of stabilization until the initial insult has settled down, the inflammation has settled down. But then for rehabbing it and to make it stronger and heal, and to prevent recurrency, that's where you have to move from stability and mobility. I think that's where, as a farrier and as a vet in a team approach, you need to look a little bit, okay, what is the stage of the injury, the pathology? And initially you want to have stability, and then you move through the use of a split shoe into that mobility. But if you're gonna give mobility to something that's acutely inflamed, and now you're allowing it to move and to be loaded, that might work against you. So you have to always think about the stage of healing you're in, or the stage of the injury that you're in.
as far as the size goes on the question, I just wanted to touch base on too, like with these, since you're fitting to perimeter and you're not fitting for extension. So you might, the person asking the question might be thinking there's not a small enough one to cover whatever horse he's thinking about, she. But since you're not shoeing with any kind of extension, you're usually gonna be at least one size smaller. In my everyday shoeing with the regular shoes, I really have extension for medial lateral and heel extension. So I've had a few that I actually dropped down 2 sizes from my regular shoe down to the split shoe. So just something to keep in mind too.
Have you explored an aluminum version of the shoes?
We're currently working on an aluminum version, yes, and we hope later this year to have the first model out. And that's also because we're looking into direct glue on application for some of these more difficult feet that have brittle or weak hoof walls, and to kind of again help them through that transition period. But yeah, that's in the pipeline. Yeah.
Right. And the final question is, there are lots of benefits to using these shoes. In what situations would you not recommend their use? Are there types of pathologies that might do more harm than good, if any?
Well, yeah, I think obviously because it's a nail-on application, and B, it allows mobility. First of all, if you have a very brittle, thin, flaky hoof wall, the shoe might not stay on because of the movement. And obviously, as we discussed earlier, in acute injuries where there's a lot of inflammation, you might want stability first and then move into the mobility by splitting the shoe. Laminitic cases, because of this very stretched white line and obviously the laminar inflammation. We don't have experience with it yet, but we don't recommend it. But it's mainly cases where there's a need for stability, like a coffin bone fracture in the initial phase, a very inflamed area. And then obviously when you have too much of a compromised hoof wall, that is then more an issue of keeping the shoe on, really. But maybe farriers can give their thoughts on that.
David?
Well, so Bart said that he hadn't really had any experience on the inflammation part, but I would definitely say that I had one that was borderline, and where like you had a little bit of laminitis, and it's not that it can't work, it's just you have to have the timing right. So it was a matter of getting rid of the inflammation in the lamina and allowing that foot to get to a point where it can handle the flexibility and then apply the split shoe for a faster recovery. But you just don't want that while you have too much inflammation that you're then going to cause pain by allowing the flex.
Correct. Yeah.
Even for me in quarter cracks, even when we have bleeding quarter cracks, these are caused by stress fractures factor on the hoof capsule. So that's where maybe if it's a bleeding quarter crack, you would keep a one shoeing cycle in a therapeutic shoeing, but then trying to get rid of the stress once they're in rehab and started training again. That's where, with a nice proper balanced trim, that you see the benefit of getting rid of that stress point, what causes the quarter crack itself. So yes, mostly for me, when will I not use the split shoe is laminitic cases, early stage, acute stage, very severe chronic laminitic cases, brittle feet, flaky hoof wall, or maybe just one glue-on application, split glue-on application with steel. It's possible, and then a nail-on application afterwards. But when horses would go when you consider horses to go barefoot and they're just not that comfortable, it's a big range of possibilities. So for me, these were most types where I wouldn't use the split shoe, but not a lot.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderfully informative webinar on the split shoe. Want to thank Dr. Halsberg, David Mass, Didier Rondelet, and Bartek Equine. You can learn more about Bartek at bartekequine.com. If you missed any part of this webinar or would like to rewatch it, please keep an eye on your email and the Friday AFJ newsletter for more information, or visit AmericanFarriers.com after 7 p.m. to find the video. On behalf of Dr. Halsberg, David Mast, Didier Rondelet, Bartek Equine, and American Farriers Journal, thank you for joining us and have a good night.